The entire building was moments away from collapsing under the weight of a mistake that started with a single sentence, spoken by the wrong person at the wrong time. The sentence was directed at a man named Aaron Lucas, a man who had spent his life fighting to be seen. And on this cold morning in downtown Chicago, he was told he didn't belong in the building, where he was about to finalize a deal worth more than anything the company had ever touched, a deal that would rewrite the future of an entire industry, a deal that would never happen. What followed didn't just ruin a partnership. It rattled an entire corporation, fractured careers, and left a trail of consequences no one in that tower ever saw coming. And it all started in the lobby. Rain collected in thin lines across the glass doors of Harper & Milton Strategic Group, a firm known for iron-tight contracts and polished floors that smelled like money. Inside, the lobby hummed with the sharp, busy energy of a place that believed nothing could touch it. People in fitted coats marched through with badges swinging, coffee in hand, talking fast and walking faster. Phones lit up there. Faces. Nobody looked up unless they had a reason. Nobody slowed down unless someone outranked them. Aaron stepped inside quietly. No one noticed him. He wore a simple charcoal coat with a torn pocket thread he hadn't bothered to fix. His shoes weren't new, but they were clean. He carried a soft, worn brown briefcase his father gave him years ago. Nothing about him screamed power or wealth. Nothing about him matched the image this building expected. At 10 in the morning, Aaron was 45, tall, calm, and steady, the kind of man who didn't take up space, yet somehow made every room feel different when he walked through. His presence softened chaos without trying. He approached the front desk. Behind it sat Lily, 25 at most, scrolling through her phone between answering calls. Straight chestnut hair, heavy eyeliner, perfect nails. Her badge said front desk coordinator. She didn't lift her eyes until his shadow reached the counter. He gave a polite nod and spoke with an even, quiet tone. "I'm here for a 10 o'clock with the executive team." She blinked once, then twice. Her expression didn't show recognition. Her gaze slid quickly over his coat, his shoes, and his briefcase, as if she was collecting evidence that confirmed whatever assumption she had already made. She asked, "For what department?" "I'm here to meet the board."
Ow.
He kept his voice steady. No frustration, no impatience, just information. "I'm Aaron Lucas." Tiny pause followed, a blank moment where his name should have meant something instead. Lily tilted her head with a small, tight smile. "And you're with which service?" "Maintenance supplier?" "Deliveries." "I'm the founder of LucasWorks Technologies." She leaned back in her chair as if he'd told a joke. "Right, but I don't see your name here. Maybe you got the wrong office. This is 3841 North Franklin Street." "Yeah, but vendors use the back entrance. If you're dropping something off, go around the side." He waited one second, just one. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he'd heard this tone countless times in airports, hotels, business, meetings, rooms where people decided he couldn't be someone important simply because he didn't fit their picture of authority. He didn't argue. He didn't correct her. He didn't pull out his laptop or documents or the formal invitation they emailed him. He simply nodded, offered the smallest hint of a smile, and turned toward the door as he reached it. The elevator dinged behind him. A young man in a navy suit stepped out. He froze when he saw Aaron, his face lit up with shock. "Mr. Lucas?" he asked, rushing forward. "Sir, you're early. The board is still getting settled. They've been waiting for you since yesterday." Aaron lifted a hand gently, stopping the young man mid-sentence. "No worries. Tell them thank you for their time." And he walked out into the drizzle. The young associate stood there stunned, mouth open, unable to process what had just happened. The elevator doors closed behind him, leaving him alone with a mistake he didn't even make, back at the desk. Lily shrugged and returned to her phone. She didn't. No, her casual dismissal had just cost the company far more than her yearly salary. She didn't know that the man she waved away was the architect of a technology platform that Fortune 500 companies were fighting to partner with. She didn't know the deal she indirectly pushed out the door was a contract valued at $54 million, a deal her firm needed desperately to stay competitive. She didn't know anything, but she would. Aaron walked down Franklin Street. Letting the soft rain settle on his coat, his phone buzzed. Hey? Message from his operations manager, confirming all green lights for the contract signing. He stared at the message. Then lifted his eyes to the skyline. The city stretched upward like a challenge. He had built his entire life on meeting challenges quietly and walking away stronger than before. And here he was again. He made a decision on the sidewalk without hesitation. A single decision that would change everything from this moment forward. He opened his contacts, found the name Jacob, our CEO of a rival firm they had once considered partnering with, a man who appreciated people who built things from nothing. He tapped the number 2 rings. Then Jacob answered, sounding surprised. Aaron, you usually call only when something's on fire. What happened? Aaron stepped under the awning of a bakery and spoke calmly. I have something for you. And the dominoes began to fall. Aaron listened to the rain tapping lightly against the awning as Jacob shifted on the other end of the call, already sensing that something serious had happened. He always knew when Aaron spoke in that calm, some measured tone that a quiet storm was coming. Tell me what's going on, Jacob said. Lowering his voice as if he were leaning forward in his chair, Aaron breathed in slowly, letting the air settle in his chest before answering. I went to Harper and Milton this morning, and I wasn't allowed past the front desk. There was a brief pause, not shocked silence, but the heavy kind that came from someone who understood far more than he wished he did. You're telling me they didn't even check your appointment? Jacob asked. No, they didn't bother. Jacob gave a short, disbelieving huff. What were you wearing? Did you at least flash credentials? Coat. A briefcase. The truth hung there, simple, undeniable, Jacob muttered, almost to himself. They thought you were a delivery guy. They thought I was something not worth their time. Another pause. This one's sharper, colder, more controlled. Aaron, Jacob finally said. Are you calling because you're ready to redirect the deal? Aaron kept his eyes on the street. Cars moved past slowly, their tires whispering against wet pavement. City sounds blended into something strangely soothing, almost grounding. I'm ready, he said. You know, we can match every term, Jacob replied quickly. We reviewed the final draft 2 months ago. We were prepared then. We're prepared now. Good. The decision didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel emotional. It felt right. And that certainty settled over him like warm air after a long winter. I'll have my legal team contact yours before the end of the day, Aaron said. Jacob let out a breath filled with relief and excitement. This is huge. I don't even know what to say. Say thank you, Aaron replied. And don't make me regret it. You won't. I promise. The call ended. Aaron slipped the phone back into his coat and continued walking, without looking back at the towering glass building behind him. Inside that building, several floors above the street, the executive conference room sat polished and prepared. A row of chairs lined an oak table. Water glasses sparkled under recessed lighting. A stack of documents waited for signatures that would never come. The board members checked their watches, puzzled that Aaron had not arrived. A senior partner, gray around the temples, asked if anyone had received a call or text. No word, the lead negotiator said, scanning his phone for the 10th time. He confirmed yesterday. He has never missed a meeting. Another partner, a sharp-eyed woman named Nora Hale, leaned forward with tension tightening her posture. Send someone down to check. The young intern rushed out of the room and into the elevator. His shoes tapped rapidly against the floor as he descended. When he returned, his face was pale. He's gone, the intern said, Reception said someone came in earlier, but she turned him away. She thought he was a contractor. The silence that followed didn't feel like air. It felt like impact. "You're telling me," the negotiator said slowly, "that our front desk dismissed the man we've been negotiating with for 8 months. That's what she said." Murmurs rose like stunned ripples in a still pond. Some faces tightened in outrage. Others drained of color as the reality settled in. Nora didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. Everyone in the room was already watching her as if waiting for a verdict. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but firm. "If he walked out," she said, "the deal is already gone." One of the executives tried to argue. "Maybe not. Maybe he had an emergency. Maybe we can call him." "You don't walk away from a contract of this scale unless you already know where you're going next," Nora replied. Aaron Lucas does not make impulsive moves. If he left with intention. Phones buzzed across the room. Fingers typed frantically. Everyone tried to salvage something that was already crumbling. Meanwhile, down on the street, Aaron continued toward the station where he would catch a ride to the airport. He didn't check his phone again. He didn't second-guess his choice. He didn't wonder how the boardroom was reacting. He knew exactly how they would react. He had seen it many times in many places. People underestimated him until the cost of doing so landed on their desks with numbers too big to ignore. At Harper and Milton, inside the same lobby where Lily had dismissed him an hour earlier, she scrolled through her messages without noticing anything unusual. She didn't know that her small decision, her lack of attention, her quick judgment, had just shifted the ground beneath the company she worked for. She would learn that soon. Very soon, but not from him, because Aaron never sought revenge. He didn't need it. He believed in letting people reveal their own mistakes. He simply walked toward the future waiting for him. In a boardroom across town, a boardroom thrilled to work with someone whose worth didn't need a badge or a designer suit to be recognized. Aaron stepped into a rideshare, closed the door behind him, and watched the city blur past as the car pulled away. He didn't need to see the fallout to know it had. It's already begun. He could feel the shift in the air, quiet, inevitable, unstoppable. A storm was coming, and he wasn't the one who started it. He was simply the one who refused to stay where he wasn't valued, and Harper and Milton had no idea how hard the storm would hit them. The boardroom stayed silent long after the intern finished speaking. A room full of people who usually argued, debated, and dominated suddenly had nothing to say. The truth sat between them like an open wound. Nora pushed her chair back slowly, as if the weight of the moment made even small movements heavy. "This is not a misunderstanding," she said. "This is a failure of awareness, and now we will pay for it." But she was underestimating just how much they would pay. They all were. The first sign came that same afternoon. Emails began circulating among the upper divisions. Short messages asking for clarification. Requests from long-standing clients wanting reassurance that their upcoming systems updates were still aligned with LucasWorks. A few asked directly whether the partnership had closed. The negotiator responded confidently at first. But confidence evaporates quickly when reality begins to tighten around it. At 4:30, everyone got the same notification. A public announcement from Redline Systems. Jacob's firm. The subject line was only 6 words. 6 words that hit harder than any lawsuit or scandal. Redline announces partnership with LucasWorks. Executives open the email with shaking hands. Every line they read cut deeper. The announcement praised Aaron's innovation. It highlighted the groundbreaking technology that Harper and Milton had spent nearly a year trying to secure. It called the deal a milestone moment for industrial logistics technology. And at the bottom was the line that destroyed the last of their hope. The agreement was finalized earlier today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today, they had lost the deal before they even realized it was gone. In the boardroom, nobody breathed. Nobody moved. One of the older partners dropped his pen, and the sound echoed across the long table like something breaking. Nora closed her laptop. Her face stayed still, but her eyes told the truth. This was only the beginning. Downstairs, Lily was still at the desk, sipping iced coffee and texting her friend about weekend plans. She had no idea the entire leadership team was now staring at an email that indirectly carried her fingerprints. She didn't know. Redline's announcement was already circulating on industry pages. She didn't know that Harper and Milton's clients were reading it, comparing dates and making rapid decisions. She didn't know that the misjudgment she made so casually was about to shape the rest of her career. Upstairs, panic spread like a quiet infection. One executive tried to lighten the blow. Maybe it won't affect our clients. Maybe we can still manage the fallout. It was a nice thought. It didn't survive long. By the end of the next day, 3 long-term clients requested urgent meetings. Not to negotiate. Not to strategize. To withdraw. They had read the announcement. They saw the statements. They understood that Redline now held the key to the very technology they needed for upcoming expansions. Those 3 clients represented millions. Millions that vanished before the firm could even prepare a response, and that was only the 2nd day. By the 5th day, employees whispered in office kitchens. People turned their heads when Nora walked down the hall. Doors closed quietly when she approached. Everyone knew a wave was rising. No one knew how big it would be. Meanwhile, on the ground floor, Lily arrived at work with her usual confidence. She noticed that people were quieter, more serious, more rushed. But she didn't give it much thought. Then, during lunch break, she overheard 2 analysts talking in the hallway. They mentioned Aaron's name. They mentioned his company. They mentioned the lost partnership. And then one of them said something she didn't understand at first. It all fell apart because of the lobby. She paused, pretending to check her phone while trying to process what she heard. Because of the lobby. What did that even mean? When she returned to her desk, her stomach felt different. It's lighter, uneasy, as if her thoughts were quietly rearranging into a picture she didn't want to see before she could push it aside. Her supervisor approached. "Lily, can you step into the conference room for a moment?" Her pulse sped up. She nodded and followed, wondering what this could possibly be about. Inside the room, 2 people from HR sat waiting. The moment she saw them, the pieces finally clicked. Her throat tightened. Her palms began to sweat. Her mind replayed the short conversation she had with Aaron. Her tone, her assumptions, the way she waved him away without listening. She sat down and tried to steady her. Breathing, one of the HR managers spoke gently. "Lily, we need to address the incident from earlier this week involving a visitor you turned away." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know who he was," she said quickly. "Nobody told me." He didn't look like the manager raised a hand. "We're not here to argue what he looked like. We're here because the consequences are serious." Her eyes stung with heat. She tried to blink away. Serious, the word echoed in her mind, stretching wider with every second. Outside the conference room, employees tried not to stare as they walked by. Everyone had heard something. Nobody knew everything, but they all knew enough to understand that the lobby mistake had become a company problem. While Lily faced the first wave of personal consequences, the firm faced something far bigger. Clients were still calling, meetings still being canceled, investors still questioning, upper management still scrambling, and high above all that noise, in a quiet office on the executive floor, Nora sat alone reviewing the week's analytics. The loss was already worse than she expected. Contracts dropping. Stocks slipping. New hesitations from partners who once trusted them blindly. All because of one morning. One assumption. One man turned away before he could reach the elevator. Nora closed her computer again and stared at the wall, her jaw tightening. "He will not come back," she whispered to herself. She knew it. Everyone knew it. But they still clung to the faint hope that maybe, somehow, they could undo what had been done. That hope would not survive the next week, because the next week would break them in ways they were not prepared for. The next week began with a heaviness that settled into every floor of the company. It wasn't the kind of problem people could ignore. It lingered in every conversation, every email, every rushed meeting behind half-closed doors. By Monday morning, something had shifted in the atmosphere. Employees who once greeted each other with easy smiles now moved through the halls with clipped steps. Conversations quieted when certain people walked by. Even the building itself felt different, as if the walls knew what was coming before the people did. The receptionist desk sat empty for most of the morning. Lily had called out. Some said she was sick. Others said she was too embarrassed to return. A few whispered that she had already been let go. Nobody knew for sure, but everyone felt the absence. Upstairs, the leadership team gathered for yet another emergency meeting. The air was tight. No one wanted to speak first. The head of partnerships, a man named Brian Lake, finally cleared his throat and began. I reached out to several clients this weekend. Most of them already knew about the red line announcement. Some wanted explanations. Others were not interested in explanations at all. He looked around the room, his eyes dull with exhaustion. One of our oldest clients from Seattle terminated their contract this morning. A wave of disbelief rippled through the table. That contract was worth almost $8 million a year, someone said quietly. As if saying it too loudly would make it worse, Nora listened without interrupting. She already knew the numbers. She had been tracking every shift, every dip, every canceled meeting for days. Still, hearing it spoken aloud struck deeper than reading it on a report. Then another executive spoke. And that's not all. 2 more clients emailed overnight. They want to pause negotiations until further notice. The room fell into silence again. Pauses never meant pauses. Pauses meant fear. Pauses meant they were waiting to see how fast the ship sank before they jumped off, Brian continued. The media isn't helping. There are new articles being posted every hour. Some barely mention us. Others mention us too much. He slid his phone across the table. The screen displayed a headline that made several eyebrows lift. Major Chicago firm loses landmark deal after lobby snub. Underneath, comments piled endlessly. People sharing their own stories of being judged. People defending Aaron. People criticizing the firm without hesitation. The story was catching fire. Someone at the table whispered, "This is getting out of control." Nora leaned forward. "It is not getting out of control. It is out of control." No one argued. By midday, things got worse. A sudden notification hit the company's internal communication system. A government agency they had been courting for 2 years decided to shift their evaluation of a large project. They cited concerns about stability, not performance, not credibility, stability. The word cut deeper than any of them expected. Stability was what Harper and Milton prided itself on. Stability was the foundation of their reputation, and losing it meant losing everything that relied on it. Meanwhile, downstairs, the temporary receptionist sat stiffly at the desk, answering phones with cautious politeness. She knew nothing about the storm above, only that she had been called in last minute and told to follow every protocol without question. Every time the phone rang, her fingers tightened on the receiver. Everyone was tense. Even people who didn't know why could feel the pressure around lunchtime. Lily walked into the building. The entire lobby seemed to notice. She looked smaller than before, not physically, but in the way people look when they carry something heavy inside them. She walked to her supervisor, who appeared startled to see her and hurried forward. "Lily, you should have called before coming in." "I wanted to talk," she said softly. "I wanted to understand what's happening." Her supervisor hesitated, then gestured toward a smaller meeting room near the elevators. When the door closed, people outside slowed their steps, pretending not to listen. Inside, the conversation was low and tense. The only words that filtered out clearly were the ones that made Lily cover her mouth with her hand and stare at the table as if she could not absorb any more. Her mistakes had become a story she could no longer hide from. Upstairs, the leadership team was dealing with the next blow. Brian read aloud an email from a long-time investor with everything going on. "We are temporarily suspending additional funding until stability is restored," another executive muttered. That funding was for the expansion project, and now the expansion is frozen, Brian said. The chain reaction was beginning to look less like a chain and more like a landslide by midweek. The company looked like a place caught between pretending nothing was wrong and trying desperately to stop everything from falling apart. Employees whispered in break rooms. Managers held back-to-back calls. HR conducted quiet conversations behind closed doors. People kept checking their phones for updates they hoped wouldn't come. But they did. They always did. On Thursday, another announcement appeared online. Redline shared a full interview discussing their new partnership with LucasWorks. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sensational. It was calm, professional, and full of confidence. Confidence that used to belong to Harper and Milton. Comments poured in. Praise for Aaron. Praise for Redline. Stories from people who related to what happened in the lobby of Harper and Milton. The world was paying attention. Nora stood alone in her office, watching her inbox flood with messages she didn't want to read. She didn't try to control her expression anymore. She looked exhausted, defeated, frustrated. She knew the pattern. She had watched other companies face similar collapses, but never from the inside. A knock sounded at her door. It was the CEO. "We need a new strategy," he said. She looked at him steadily. "We need accountability. Without accountability, strategy is useless." He exhaled heavily, rubbing his forehead. "We are trying. We are reviewing staff. We are trying to manage public relations. And none of it matters," she said. "Until we understand that this came from inside, not outside." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. He knew she was right. By Friday, the company had lost nearly $18 million in projected revenue. 2 senior partners were considering stepping down. And whispers of layoffs had already begun circulating even though no one wanted to say it out loud. And through all of this, one detail remained unspoken in every meeting but impossible to ignore. Aaron Lucas had still not reached out. Not a call, not a message. Not even a polite line to explain his reasons. His silence was louder than any statement. He could have made that silence became its own message. A message everyone understood clearly. He was gone, and he was not coming back. By the time 2 full months passed, Harper and Milton was no longer the same place that had once moved with unshakable confidence. The floors were quieter. The meetings were shorter. The conversations were heavier. People walked with their shoulders tight and their expressions guarded. The firm that used to feel untouchable now felt fragile. The collapse didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It arrived slowly, then all at once. One client left, then another. A partner resigned, then another. Whispers of restructuring turned into confirmed suspensions. The building that once buzzed with ambition now echoed with uncertainty. And without warning, on a Monday morning, in the middle of a stubborn March chill, Aaron Lucas walked back through the same glass doors where everything began. He didn't wear anything different. Same dark coat. Same worn briefcase. Same steady walk. But the moment the security guard saw him, he straightened immediately and quietly radioed the upper floors. Someone was already on their way down. Aaron gave the guard a small nod. No tension. No hesitation. He stood calmly, eyes drifting across the lobby that had once dismissed him without a second thought. There was no Lily at the desk now. She had been let go weeks ago. A temporary receptionist named Jenna sat in her place. She greeted him politely, unaware of who he was or what his presence meant. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened. Nora Hale stepped out. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She simply looked at him with an expression that carried exhaustion, regret, respect, and something difficult to name. She approached him slowly. "Aaron." He nodded once. "Nora." She didn't extend her hand immediately. He didn't either. There was a quiet understanding between them that made gestures feel unnecessary. "Thank you for coming," she said, "even if it's not for what we once hoped." He didn't confirm or deny anything. He simply followed when she gestured toward a smaller conference room on the 3rd floor. It wasn't the grand boardroom where they had planned to finalize the largest deal of the year. This room was simple, almost plain. 2 chairs, a table, a small tray of untouched coffee cups. Nora closed the door behind them. "I'll be direct," she said. the honesty in her voice sharper than her usual control. The last 2 months have been difficult. We lost clients. We lost investments. We lost a reputation we spent years building. Erin listened with a calm stillness that made her nerves tighten. We made changes, she added. The people who caused this are no longer here. He nodded. That's good. But I know, she continued, that none of this brings the deal back. I'm not asking you to reconsider. I'm asking for clarity. You walked away without saying a word, and your silence has shaped everything since. Erin held her gaze. He didn't speak quickly. He never did. When he finally answered, his voice was steady and direct. Someone asked me recently if I was ever going to speak publicly about what happened, if I was going to explain myself, if I was going to call out your firm. Nora's breath stilled. I told them no, he said, because I wasn't interested in revenge. That's not how I operate. She let out a slow breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. He continued. I came today because I wanted to see what I walked away from. I wanted to make sure the decision I made was the right one. Was it? She asked quietly. Yes, he said. It was. There was no anger in his voice. No satisfaction. No trace of triumph. Just certainty. The certainty of a man who had learned long ago that dignity didn't need volume. Nora lowered her eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words. When she looked back up, she wasn't defensive anymore. She wasn't the calculating strategist her colleagues knew. She was simply someone who understood the lesson too late. Erin, she said, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly. He nodded, accepting the sincerity without clinging to it. The meeting didn't last longer than 10 minutes. No heated debates. No rewrites of the past. No pleas for reconsideration. Just honesty. Respect. Closure. On the walk back to the elevators, a group of interns passed them. One of them, a young woman wearing a brown blazer, slowed when she recognized him. Her eyes widened slightly, not out of shock, but out of quiet admiration. She didn't speak. She simply offered him a respectful nod. He returned it. Back in the lobby, Jenna was talking softly on the phone, organizing visitor badges. She didn't notice Erin glancing briefly at her desk. Not at her. At the space where someone once sat believing she had the authority to decide who deserved access and who didn't. He walked toward the doors. The city air rushed in as they opened, cold but clean. The wind tugged at his coat, and for the first time since the failed meeting, he let a small smile form. Not smug, not triumphant. Just sure. Behind him, Nora stood quietly at the top of the lobby steps. She watched him disappear into the crowd. The man they could have built an empire with. The man they misunderstood. The man they dismissed in a moment that cost them more than numbers could ever measure. He had not destroyed the company through anger. He had not lashed out or gone on a public campaign. He had simply taken his values someplace it would be respected, and the consequences had followed naturally. What lingered in the building long after he left wasn't fear or resentment. It was a realization of how easily power can go unnoticed when people only look for it in polished suits and perfect labels. Real power rarely announces itself. It doesn't need to. It walks in with the same worn briefcase, the same quiet voice, the same steady calm. And if people fail to recognize it, they lose more than a deal. They lose the chance to stand beside someone whose character could have changed everything. Harper and Milton learned that the hardest way possible, and every person who witnessed the downfall carried the same quiet reminder with them from that day on. Respect isn't earned by appearance. Respect is earned by awareness, by listening, by understanding that greatness often enters a room without needing permission. Erin never raised his voice. He never pointed fingers. He never demanded an apology. His silence taught the lesson better than words ever could, and the world remembered him not for the deal he walked away from, but for the strength that made walking away the most powerful move he could make.